Hello, everybody. It's Friday evening, my time in the UK, so it's time for our weekly This Week on Discord show. If you're new to this one, this is where the developer relations team look at questions that we've had this week in the Redis Discord. And if you're interested in what that is, go ahead and sign up for that. It's free. It's basically a place to talk about all things Redis and software engineering. And we monitor it and try and answer questions as best we can. It's not an official support channel, but it is a great community hub. So this week, I'm joined by a couple of our team members. So I've got Justin and Savannah with me. So I'll ask them to bring themselves onto stream when they're ready.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
So how's everybody's week been this week? I know we've all been doing different things. I've actually been off on vacation, so my week has largely been not work related.
Yeah, my week was fun. I went to Texas A&M and went to their Geo Information Systems event and did some demo coding with Redis Geo.
Mine was pretty good. I worked on some new videos, worked on some new content, and started some background tasks for a new course. I'll just give you that bit of a teaser there. So it's been a lot of new stuff and new fun this week.
Excellent. Yeah. And then next week it's Thanksgiving. So we will run the show this time next week, but we'll be staffing it with those of us that do not live in the United States. We will be working then. So it'll be myself and likely Suze, and who knows who else, probably just us two, but we'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up some slides here. So we've got a few topics this week that came from Discord. What we do here is we sort of redact the username and the avatars because, you know, when you ask these questions, you didn't necessarily know we were going to bring them on stream and talk about them. There are no bad questions in here, so we try and get to everything, and you know, nothing's too basic or too complex. What tends to work well is our Discord's quite developer focused. So, you know, sort of developer tools and programming languages type questions. We'll try to help with things like operations, DevOps type questions to the best we can, but we are a developer relations team, so that's kind of our sweet spot. So first question we got is here, somebody's asked, hello, in the RedisInsight 2 GUI. So RedisInsight is a tool for visualizing data in Redis. You'll see us using that on a lot of our streams. Where is the option to select the database index other than 0? So I think Justin was going to take this, and maybe you should explain what database indexes are as well.
Yeah, so database indexes are basically like namespaces. You can think logical separations of your Redis instance, and you could do that. Used to you would think of it as like you would keep one particular section of your database, maybe your caching, on one database index, and then you'd stick something else like session storage and another, message queues and another, and these indexes would start at 0, 1, and 2. Databases with Redis, they always start at default at 0. And the question is, how can I change my database index within RedisInsight? Well, that's not a lacking feature. That's a design choice. Choosing multiple indexes within a database is kind of an anti-pattern now. The quick and dirty answer is databases are cheap and fast. So we can actually afford to use multiple instances of Redis rather than one instance of Redis with multiple indexes of databases. There's a couple of reasons why. Redis Enterprise, the on-premises Redis Enterprise software, only uses database 0. So if you're going to be expanding to the size of Redis Enterprise, you're only going to be using 0. And Redis Search only uses one database, and that's database index 0. So it's no longer an acceptable pattern to use multiple indexes within a database. Savannah.
So Justin, how would I connect RedisInsight to a different database instance?
Yeah, well, if you do want to do that, if you do want to connect to another instance, if you do want to connect to another index within an instance, you can do that within the Redis command line. So that's what you can do. And if you want to connect to another instance within the RedisInsight, you can actually choose from the RedisInsight dropdown a different database. And yeah, just wanted to show real quick. If you want to read up a little bit more about Redis select, we have a command here. It is an old command, but it checks out. So you see, it's been available since version 1. But honestly, when we're actually using like clustering and things like that, it's better to just use a single indexed database, so database 0, because commands on different indexes of databases are atomic. So if you're working on one command on database 0 and you're trying to do something else on database 1 within the same instance, you're going to have a collision, or you're going to have to wait. So it's just no longer practical. So yeah, check out select if you want to read more on that. But you can switch your database instances within the Redis CLI, within the RedisInsight. But yeah, we recommend that you start sort of like phasing out that pattern and just using multiple instances of Redis, because it's honestly just easier, way easier.
Yeah, it is in there in Insight, but it's sort of hidden. So you have to create a new connection, then the connection drop down, select which virtual database if you want to browse it. But unless you've got a really, really good reason to do it, like it's some old infrastructure that you can't change, don't do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let us move on a little bit. So second thing that we had, somebody was asking in redis-py, so the Python client for Redis, is there a way to check if value exists in a channel and get all values in a specific channel? So yeah, channels means that they are talking about pub/sub, which is sort of ephemeral one-to-many messaging in Redis. So pub/sub things don't really exist. They never appear in the key view. If you're not subscribed or listening and somebody publishes something, then you've missed it. It's kind of like broadcast television before streaming or DVRs. You can't choose. So the question was, how do you retrieve information about these messages? And I think Savannah was going to talk about this.
Yeah, so you touched on, how pub/sub is ephemeral. It's often called like fire and forget, where Justin, you're on here. We'll go to this one instead. That's okay. We've got 2 different screens of the slides, so it's all good. So pub/sub is usually considered like fire and forget, where a message is sent and that's it. It's done. It's gone. You either saw it or you didn't. It's a shooting star across the sky. You missed it. And so the ways that you can sort of get around that are you can kind of take a picture of the shooting star. And by that, I mean, if you are listening to something, you can use your subscription to get that publication and then store it somewhere else so that it can be processed later. You can also use the data structure called streams instead of pub/sub, where streams just sort of add on to each other, and you can start from anywhere in that stream of streams. Streams, you can start anywhere in that stream of messages that have been added to the stream. You can start like at the beginning, you can start at an index that so that's another good way to sort of say like those messages are saved until your stream gets too long and then starts chopping off from the bottom or from the oldest things that were added to the stream. So if you want it to be, the most stable, I would say, is probably subscribing to the channel and then saving that message using like a redis.set and then storing that whole message. But streams is also really cool because you can have different groups do different processing with those streams. You can have different consumer groups, consuming them in different ways. So there are different options to creating a backlog.
Yeah, I guess another thing you could do if you then saved those messages in like a hash or a JSON document is use search over them. So if you wanted to then later go find something and you didn't know what the key was or your keys weren't an access pattern that you were using. So it's one of those questions where there's like the answer is like, yeah, you've got options. And you should.
And it depends on your use case. And it depends on, do you want to be able to search them, or do you want to potentially delete them after a certain amount of time? I know a lot of things are intentionally like, you know, Streams doesn't have a time to live, but it does have the whole, like, if it gets too much, we just start chopping off the end. And I know there are plenty of things that's, you know, very intentional. So consider your use case and pick the best way to solve that problem for you.
Yeah, the other reason why you might want to continue this with PubSub is if the source of the messages coming out of PubSub is actually key space notifications. So I've been playing with that on stream this week. So if you want to know when a key's been changed, those notifications won't tell you what changed necessarily or what the new value is. But if you wanted to build like a log of what changed, you could subscribe to those and put that in a stream or something as well. So there are reasons sometimes where you can't switch away from PubSub, but quite often, if you want this sort of behavior, as you say, Streams is probably a better start point if you control the application code.
Yeah.
And that's been out for like 2 major releases now. So if you're not using at least Redis 5, you should be, and you should probably upgrade. Okay, let's see what we've got next. So someone asked, what's the best way to move over 1 million members in, I guess, a Redis set to a Redis list? I tried to do it in an external Lua script by popping the elements and then pushing them onto the list. Okay, but that seems quite slow. Alternatively, can they run a script on the Redis server? Okay, I think Justin was going to talk us through some options for this one.
Yeah, this is a really good one. I was actually kind of playing with this exact scenario not too long ago in my live stream. So you want to take a set and you want to turn it into the contents into a list within Redis. I like the idea of using Lua within the Redis server because that is very fast and you're not going to be interrupted. And there are also just a couple different questions, or a couple different options. If they're not actually doing this like over and over and over, and it's not like a constant action, they can always use Riot, which I really like. Throw this up here. Riot is basically Redis input-output tools, and there's quite a few different options. We have Riot DB, Riot File, Riot Gen, Riot Redis. And you could, now this is actually going to take the data out of Redis, and then you can actually call it to put it back in. So if you're doing some sort of like offline maintenance, you can actually run Redis Riot, which is great. The other option is with a client to actually call, pull down the entire list and then I'll push it or R push or what have you into a list within a pipeline. And that makes it extremely fast because you don't actually have to worry about the return values every single time you call an L push. So this is significantly faster. And these are just kind of the 2 things off the top of my head. But I would definitely check timings, check the performance with an internal Lua script. I think that would also be very, very good. I didn't have time to actually test all 3 of these out, but these are top of my mind what I would do. But definitely try Riot. The more I'm using Riot, the more I'm just really enjoying it because it works really well. I was able to create like 200,000 different JSON objects.
Simon, did you lose Justin too, or is it me?
I think we did briefly, yeah. He was saying he was able to create 200,000 JSON objects, probably for his live streaming series on
birds. Yeah,
big data set with birds. So yeah, hopefully, Justin is rejoining.
Maybe. Maybe.
We'll give Justin a minute to rejoin us, but let's just move on for the moment, and we can always come back to that. So there we go. So yeah,
we've got a +1 for Riot, and thanks to Justin for bringing it up.
There we go. Okay, so we'll go back to here. Yeah, so I guess the only thing I'd add to this would be this sort of says move, so I assume this is like a one-off operation. So if this was something where you wanted one data structure to mirror another data structure continuously, you might want to look at other things like using a sort of key space notifications, or possibly even Redis gears to run something when a set gets or gets moved, if you want to keep all of that data on the server and not run it elsewhere.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Justin's back with us.
Doesn't seem like it quite yet.
No? Am I here?
There you well.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello. So I don't know if you had anything else to add on this one, Justin.
Just to say that I highly promote Riot because it worked really well, and it worked well for me. For each use, different tools. So try all three.
Cool. So yeah, again, it's one of those where it's like, yes, you've got options, and trying them out with your data set is kind of important. I'd also be interested to know what the use case is for moving things from a set to a list, as in what's changed in the application that stuff that used to live in a set now needs to go in the list. But maybe they'll come back to us with that. I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to move this along. This is one that I'm going to take. So somebody was wondering if anyone's got experience of GeoSearch pagination, new to Redis and struggling to find articles on GeoSearch pagination. And they asked a question on Stack Overflow that we'll look at in a minute as well. So GeoSearch is a relatively, either a new command or one that's been extended recently that replaces a few other commands. But bit of background on Redis Geo. So Redis Geo is a way of putting things into what's actually a Redis sorted set underneath, and it uses geohashing, which is a way of converting lat longs to more efficient data representations. And then you can ask it questions like, find me all the things in that sorted set that are within a radius or inside a box of sort of this width and this height from a given lat long, or long lat as Redis does it. It does it backwards, but I'm sure Savannah, who's just been to a GIS conference, will tell me that's actually the correct way. It's just not the way that most people do it.
What I learned is that there is no correct way. You just specify which one's which.
So I think we went with the wrong one, but we'll run with it. It's the opposite way around from what you think in Redis. So they're asking, how can you paginate the results for GeoSearch? So why would you want to do this? If you ask it a question like, find me, say I'm in like Massachusetts, find me every Dunkin' Donuts within 50 miles of somewhere in downtown Boston, you're going to get a lot of results. And you might not always want that because it's causing the database to do a lot of work and then serialize a lot of data over the wire. And what you might want is just, give me the first however many's, and then you can sort of paginate through them like you would a normal result set or a Redis search result set. So they asked this question on Stack Overflow, and I'm just going to change a few things around and share my desktop here. So they asked this question on Stack Overflow, which we can look at. So we do monitor Stack Overflow, not to the extent that we monitor our own Discord, but also there's the community on there. So this is a totally valid place to ask questions. So somebody was asking, basically, they've got queries that returns thousands of items. So imagine like the Dunkin' Donuts near Boston or somewhere. And they basically want to be able to paginate those results. And somebody here has answered this with, you can use GeoSearch store. So we'll look at what that is. It's a newer command. And you can do that and get the results stored in Redis in a new key, which is also a sorted set. Then you can use the Z range or Z range, last letter of the alphabet range, command that paginates through these and just bring them back in chunks that seem to fit your application. So the downside of this is you create a sort of temporary result key in Redis. There's a few commands that do this. They run things and they store the result in another key, and a lot of those commands relate to sorted sets. So there's like Z union store and things like that. So what I'm going to try and do is use, we have an off-the-shelf GeoSearch demo here that uses BART rail stations. There's like 50 or something of those. So what I'm going to do is load those up into Redis, and see how this works. So I've got this environment here already set up. So I'm just going to do load in some stations from a KML file that we have as part of this repo. We've loaded 52 things. So if I then do this and make this nice and big, and we can basically do, what we can see here is it loaded information about each station into its own key, but we have this key called stations, and that's a geo key. But if we do types stations, we can expect to see Z set or Z set because it's really a sorted set underneath. So what we need to do now is run some queries and store the results. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not even going to pretend that I'm going to type this because there's a lot of typing. I've got a command here that what that's going to do is it's going to run the GeoSearch store command. It's going to store the result in a key called results1. We're going to run the search on a key called stations, which is our sorted set. And we're going to do it from a position of here, which is somewhere in the Bay Area. And I want all stations within a 40-mile radius. So what happens when I do that is it says 51. So it found 51 stations that match, and they're now stored in a new key called results1. So if we do type results1, you can see that that is a sorted set there. And now I can then do sorted set stuff on this. So I can do z-range results. Type, I've been off for a week. 105 with stores to see what's in there. What you'll see is I get the 5 nearest BART stations to the point that I was asking it for. And what's this here? This is actually the geohash number. So this may not be that useful to a front end because you maybe want to display the distance or something like that. So if you wanted more information about this, you can either go ask the original station sorted set to get information about Millbrae, or you can run a different sort of command. So we're going to then do another one of these, which I'm just going to copy and paste because it's a lot of typing. And this time we're going to say I want to use a temporary key results2, and I'm pulling from stations again, same position, same radius. And this time, instead of writing the geohash, I want to store the actual distance. That'll be distance in miles. So when I do this, I again get 51 matches, and now I've got results2. And if I run this same command again, but over results2, what you'll see is I've got those stations with their distance. So now we could paginate through this. So I could basically say like 6 to 99 or whatever and get the rest of them. Again, we're not getting the full information about this, so we're not getting the locations to plot them on a map, but we could use other sorted set geo commands to pull those back as needed. So that's kind of a way of doing this. And I've now got these extra 2 keys that are taking up a bit of memory, but we did all the work on the server without sending all of this data over the wire to an application, which would then just discard most of it or have to paginate it itself. So yeah, that's a way of doing this. It is slightly different. Another approach you could take to this would be put all of your data in hashes or JSON documents and then use Redis search, because that has geo capability and it has pagination of search queries. But if you've got an existing data set in here, or if you've got other good reasons for using the geo series of commands, then check out GeoSearch Store, which is here. It's been available since 6.2.0. We're now on Redis 7, so hopefully you're up to 6.2.0 and can take advantage of it. And I don't know, anyone else want to say anything about Geo? I know, Savannah, you've been in like the Geo land recently.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool that it's a sorted set underneath, because it means you can do some silly things where, like, if you have your sorted set, you can just do like the geo distance between 2 of the things. You can ask for the geo position for a score, and it's meaningless, but it's kind of silly. It's kind of fun. You could use it like if you had a leaderboard and you wanted to do something silly, you could put people's scores on a map. Yeah, I think it's just kind of fun that that's because they are that same underlying structure, if you try to use the geo commands on just like a score, it lets you do that.
Yeah, I think the other thing to point out is because it's a sorted set, Redis keeps it in sorted order for you. So as you insert and remove and update things from there, it's kind of all sorted for you. So making these queries is relatively cheap because it's not having to sort them on the fly per query and then cache the result and so on.
Yeah.
It's always there. So yeah, that's GeoSearch tool. That's not one I'd actually used before this stream. So I might go and add it into this example that we've got. I kind of wish we'd got, oh, here we go. We've got images of what this example looks like, but basically it gives you a map and you get to play around with putting a pin in the map and then like telling it what sort of radius or box you want, and you see stations that come out as a result. So this was also an application that people worked on during our recent Hacktoberfest thing. So people actually improved the CSS for this quite a lot because I built it in the first place and it really showed that I'm not a front-end developer. So we're very grateful to the community for diving in and doing that. And hopefully the person who did this got their 4 pull requests and DigitalOcean will send them a t-shirt. So we'll, hopefully that works. Okay, so we have one more topic, I believe. So let's go back here and try this. So this is one that's actually come up quite a few times and we had to go sort of dig it out. But basically it's how do I use redis-py, so the sort of de facto Redis client for Python, with a Redis cluster. And previously the answer was you kind of had to pull in some other client implementation that built on top of redis-py and use that. And there were a few of those. And what's happened in recent releases of redis-py is it started supporting clusters. So you can now do that directly. So I am going to try and do some sort of clustering demo with Python, which may be entertaining. We'll see how that goes. But first off, how do you get a cluster? So I've basically just borrowed the example here on the Redis docs of building a cluster that has a number of instances of Redis server, and they're all configured. Basically, you just make some Redis conf files and set the ports to be different things and put them in cluster mode. And I think we have an example. Yeah, we have an example. There we go, config file here. So I've got basically this, except I've got 7,000, 7,001, 7,002. This one covers 6-node cluster. I've got a 3-node cluster just because it shows the concept more easily. And hopefully I have got that up and running over here. So let's see that. So we've got one node here. So this is a Redis server instance listening on port 7,000. Another one on port 7001, another one on 7002. And what does this mean and why would you do it? So you can cluster things for a couple of reasons. The one we're going to look at here is basically, imagine these were running on separate machines. Redis keeps all the data in memory. So in order to exceed the memory available to a single machine, one of the ways you can do this is run a cluster and split the key space out across different machines. And what it does is it hashes the keys to what are called slots, and they live on different cluster members. And then you need a client that's kind of aware of how this works, because it's going to have to go connect to the right version or the right instance to get that key back. So what I'm going to do now is just swap over laggy keyboard today. Everything seems to be lagging today. So let's do that and let's have a look at what's actually quite a very short Python file. And VS Code is still starting. I seem to have quite a slow and or hot machine today. Here it comes. Here it comes, honest.
I believe our technology is trying to tell us something.
Yeah, it's not a good day for the, well, I would say the internet, but this is local running VS Code. So I'm, however, running like 4 instances of Redis, but that shouldn't really affect things this badly. Okay, so we've got some very simple code. So what I'm going to do is import Redis like you normally would. And then here, I'm going to instantiate an instance of Redis Cluster. And I'm going to pass it one of the members of the cluster. So we're going to say, go connect to 127.0.0.1.7,000. Decode responses is just a thing that tells us to decode all of the responses that the Python client gets back from a byte array into a string, which is what we normally want. Then we're going to set a couple of keys. And the way this works is one of these keys will hash to a slot on 7,000 and one to 7,001. But this is essentially transparent to the developer. So I can run this code like this. And hopefully when that's run, I can see what is going on. So I should then be able to do Redis CLI, I think it's -C and then -P 7,000. So I can connect to one of the members of the cluster. And I can basically now use the CLI in a way that it's going to understand this cluster by querying this Redis server as to what's the cluster topology. So if I do get hello, I think I called it, and you'll see that came back immediately. So hello is a key that lives on this member that I've connected to. If I do get Simon, what you'll see is I get redirected to this other slot, 5815. That is on another member of the cluster, and it's gone away and got that for me. So that's also how you can expect the cluster client in Python to behave. So what I'll do is, we get asked this question quite a lot. So I will produce a little demo that kind of takes this and does some other things with it. And then we have a course that covers clustering generally that I believe, Justin, you're probably the best person to talk about for a moment.
Yeah, it is RU301, I believe. That's running Redis at scale. So that'll actually show you how to set up a cluster with open source Redis.
Thanks. Yeah, and that's over on Redis University. So yeah, I think that was everything that we got topic-wise this week. So the only other thing I was going to show was, let's go and have a look at what is going on over on Discord.
And Simon, we've got a question in the chat if you want to take a peek.
Oh, do we? Let's have a look. Is the Redis CLI just connected to the first node, or does it create a separate connection to number 2? Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I would imagine it's going to have to go create a separate connection to the second one and look that up, because the way that clients work is they need a map of all the servers, and they're managing that in the background. So I would imagine this is the same. I don't think there's any like server-to-server magic happening here.
I always think you guys are brave when you just like start reading the questions out loud or just throw them out on screen. And I'm like, I'm going to read it to see if I can answer it first.
Yeah. I mean,
and if I can't answer it, I'm just going to pretend I didn't see it at the moment.
We don't know everything, but we will try. So yeah, so here's our Discord. I mean, obviously that's what this show's all about. You can see over here, there's an event going on at the minute this week on Discord. We also operate university office hours here on Thursdays, and again that will pop up in the corner. But if you join, or if you're watching the show and you're wondering what this is on about, then join the Discord. Feel free to ask questions. We may or may not feature them here, but we generally try and get round to answering as many as we can, or the community will just jump in and help you out too. So I think that's about everything. So I will just pop up the here's how you join Discord. But I guess the other thing we traditionally do at the end of this is, does anybody on the team have anything they want to talk about, or anything you want to share that you're up to? I know we did it a little bit at the start.
Yeah. I'll be live streaming on Tuesday. I don't know what I'm doing yet. So join in for the adventure.
Nice.
I'm also going to be live streaming. It's going to be on Monday, 3 p.m. Standard, Pacific Standard. And I'll be playing with lots of bird data. So,
and I'm live streaming on Thursdays at like 10:30 in the morning. I think it's UTC now because we're the same as UTC or something like that. I'm doing counting things. I'm going to try and lift something up here. And we're going to build a counting rig that uses this Raspberry Pi and this like 7-segment display.
Ooh.
That is like you see in a gas station, and a couple of really satisfying actual arcade machine buttons that have these really nice clicky switches on the bottom. So we're going to try and do that, and like counting things, not that hard. It isn't that hard, but what we're trying to do is build a counting system that has multiple things contributing. So every time you press a button somewhere on the web or on the Pi, it adds one to a global count. And then we're having all of them show what the current count is, and that be reflected back to all of them, which involves some tricks with PubSub and server-sent events and some other stuff. So that's kind of what I'm doing. Last week was the web interface part, and this week, which will be Thanksgiving in the US, but again, some of us don't work out of the US, so I'll be working and I'll be doing that on what is Thanksgiving for everyone else.
I'll be eating.
I'll be sleeping.
Sounds good. So yeah, I think that's everything. So yeah, we'll see you. Oh, some of us will see you this time next week. Justin and Savannah will be taking a well-deserved break, and yeah, catch us on Discord in the meantime. Thanks everybody. Bye.
See ya.